My opinion, looking forward a little bit into like what's the role of AI, my firm belief is always that the biggest gains are outside of the coding task itself, outside of code authoring itself. Because I've never met a developer, surprisingly, that wants to spend less time coding.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of Peer Review. Got a great new guest today, Laura Tacho, and we're going to talk a little bit about her last name in a second. She's a CTO at DX, where she's helping companies measure and improve developer productivity. She's led engineering teams at CloudBees, Aula, Nova Credit, and brings a lot of experience in dev leadership and metrics. We've got some pretty cool topics today. I think technical debt is one that Laura has a lot of great posts recently on how teams should think about dev metrics, and then how AI-powered tooling is coming into play with all of these. Laura, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Omar.
So in the prep here, we were just talking about your last name, Tacho. I guess as you said, it's German. It means speedometer, which I think is kind of
Yeah,
hilarious given that you live in the developer productivity world.
it is pretty funny. Yeah, it's like Takomita is the speedometer. And so that's how when I have to spell my name, instead of using the NATO phonetic alphabet, I can just say it's like Takomita, but just without the mita. But for someone who spends all their time thinking about how teams can move faster, I do think it's kind of it's a nice touch.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Maybe you could just share a little bit about your overall career and then also just how you got into developer productivity.
Yeah, so right now I'm the CTO at DX. We're a developer intelligence platform that help organizations, big and small, measure and improve developer productivity and performance in their engineering organizations. I've been working in developer productivity dev tool infrastructure space for about 15 years. Infrastructure is really my background in engineering. I got involved working with Docker when it was just a tiny little baby
Wow.
kernel utility before Docker Compose existed. I actually wrote some of the very first open source tooling for Docker, which has now become part of the product. And they're tools that if you develop with Docker, you're probably using them right now or have used them this week, which is, I
That's
think, really satisfying. But I care so much about making developers more productive. And now at DX, I get to do it on a really big scale with a lot of outstanding companies like Dropbox and Etsy. So it's cool to kind of see the evolution of all of these kind of same ideas and things that have stayed the same over time.
Yeah, very interesting. So recently you had a post on LinkedIn where you were talking a little bit about technical debt and you were using these terms about cash versus debt, right? What are the trade-offs with technical debt? And so I'd love to get some of your thoughts on that. How do you think about that cash versus debt? Hilariously enough, I never really converted the debt part of the financial equation into paying for it now with cash.
Yeah. I mean, you can even take that further and think about it. Okay, I can take out a loan to do something now that I couldn't do. But you can also think of like, I have to pay interest on this every single time I
Yeah.
do something. And that's really the pain that we feel when we carry around technical debt.
At some point that debt, the interest is too high to carry, right? And it's hurting your ability to do anything today.
Yeah, I think, a way that I often describe this is if you are cooking in a kitchen and you never do the dishes, before long, it's going to be really, really difficult to cook even like a grilled cheese sandwich because you're not going to have dishes, utensils. There's not going to be a clean stove to operate on. And that's sort of how technical debt accumulates. It's not necessarily any one thing where you decide, I'm just going to use a messy kitchen today. It's a series of short-term trade-offs, maybe long-term trade-offs that accumulate over time and just make it difficult to move quickly.
So I think one of the big challenges in technical debt is that it's hard to quantify how much it's slowing you down or how much those
Mhm.
interest payments are becoming against maybe your principal. What is the real impact that's having? And then let's say you've got 100 different tickets in the backlog of technical debt.
Mhm.
Which are the ones that, that it's worth paying off? That interest rate is really high, maybe
Mhm.
versus that what's credit card interest rate debt versus low mortgage interest rate. So just curious how you think about those two things.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's good to bring up the mortgage example here because this is an example of times that it's very prudent to take out debt. Companies in very early stages, if they have market demand, they need to deliver quickly. And sometimes that means accumulating technical debt. But if they hadn't accumulated that debt, there wouldn't be a business because they wouldn't have gotten to market faster and fast enough. And so sometimes we can split hairs about whether good debt actually exists, but I didn't save up cash to pay off my house 100% when I bought it. We have a mortgage just like most people, and I'm lucky enough to be a homeowner, I don't live in the United States. Again, we can have that conversation at a different time, a different venue. But I think technical debt is a problem that every engineering team has. There are certain things like the credit card interest rate that are really, really painful, and they just cost so much money, figuratively and literally, because technical debt truly does cost your company money, even if we just quantify it in terms of lost time, which is one way that I think engineering leaders trying to advocate for technical debt type projects can make a good business case for doing them. We can talk about how much waste it actually generates in the system, how much longer things take. One other thing that I would want to mention here is I actually don't love the term technical debt. I say it all the time because people understand what I mean. You know what I mean when I say technical debt. Any developer understands what I mean when I say technical debt. But as soon as you leave our environment of people who really understand it because they've lived through that problem, it's really difficult to use those two words to articulate.
What do you think is a better term or a better way to describe it?
And I wish there were one term that was great, but truly what I encourage engineering teams to do is to really classify it in terms of, is this work? Is this increasing quality? Is this increasing build time? Like, get really specific with what the outcome is and just talk about it in terms of that, because then that's much clearer to understand.
Technical debt's kind of a big category. It's a little bit vague. And what does it mean?
I think the other thing about developer productivity, developer experience, technical debt, developers sometimes don't have a great reputation inside organizations because the ping pong and beer problem exists around the perception of things like developer experience and even things like technical debt. A lot of times in the past, those words have been, maybe weaponized is not it's a little bit too extreme, but sort of used as a way to say, well, we're going to do what we want to do. And you need to trust us because we're developers and you don't understand how to code. And so this is what we're going to do. It's technical debt. Let us do it. And I really think we should expect more from ourselves, quite honestly. I think we should raise our own standards for our ability to articulate what it is that we're trying to do and what outcome we're trying to achieve. I would raise my own standard to figure out, is it stability? Is it quality? Is it something else?
Yeah, I think communicating that more clearly creates trust rather than erodes it. So maybe switching topics a little bit. Okay, you obviously spend time in developer productivity. We ourselves a bit, we're building AI tools for developers. We see lots of folks saying, hey, how do we measure how much these AI tools are helping us, right? Whether it's in coding, code review, testing, whatever, documentation. What are you seeing out there in terms of how people are trying to measure these things and some of the impacts some of these AI tools are having?
Mm-hmm. I think the most common way that organizations are looking to measure the impact of AI tools is by a time savings kind of measurement. And, we can do this in multiple ways. We have quantitative metrics that show how work goes through a system. I think a more direct way is simply asking developers, what's your experience with this tool? How much time did it save you? And as soon as you can correlate something with time, you can correlate it with money. And so engineering leaders looking to build a business case or trying to evaluate the ROI of introducing, whether it's an AI coding assistant, a code review tool, or any other developer tool, that is a really easy, not easy, but it's a more straightforward path to building a business case and really quantifying the ROI. I think some companies are going to be more interested in the money aspect of that, and some companies are going to be more interested in the time savings aspect of it.
Well, when you say money, you mean like time savings turning into money, or you mean a separate definition of money?
So for this particular example, if we're trying to measure time saved by becoming more efficient because we're using an AI tool, that would be sort of salary, either recovered or waiting time in the system. So in the event we're using AI code review, we no longer have to wait in a queue for the first code review. A developer can do that in the IDE with the AI code review tool. We're not going to get that time back 100% because the developers are working on something else, when they're idle. It's not that it's idle time, but we can start to draw a line around the imprint of the effect of the tool. And often that's even dramatically more visibility than leaders have had before, where they've actually had no visibility into how this tool is working. And so taking those steps to build the business case, figure out time savings, translate that into an efficiency story, tell the story with data to show the overall impact on your engineering org. These are really good ways to show the business case. And that's what I see organizations doing most commonly.
I kind of struggle a little bit with the developer experience part of it sometimes. I mean, I think the developer, obviously their experience just in terms of like, hey, did it seem useful? Was it helpful?
Hmm.
Do I believe it helped me move faster? Totally buy that. But at the same point, you know, if you're, let's say you're ever using a coding tool and it's like, I'm going 5% faster or 10% faster. I think that's hard to like, for somebody to themselves say, I went 10% faster. It's one thing if you're like, I got that done in 1/3 the time.
Yeah.
In our code review agent, which kind of runs in like GitHub and Bitbucket and whatever, GitLab, like the metrics we see are that typically PRs close in like 1/10 the time. But it's so, you have large PRs, you have small PRs. And so that's where sometimes I wonder, like, is there better tooling out there to like measure these things? Because it's, somebody might say, yeah, I went faster, but it was also because the senior
Hmm.
reviewer, they had some time, so they were able to jump on it quickly versus last time we had a P1 going. And so they couldn't really jump on it. So that's where sometimes I kind of wonder if people are struggling a little bit across the entire org to really understand those things.
One of the really interesting things about developer experience is that if the developer believes they are more productive, they are more productive, even if that time gain is 0%. Because the perception of productivity has such an influence on someone's motivation and how productive they believe they're being. This was really the backbone of the space framework of developer productivity. It's not just about quantitative data, it's also about perceptions of productivity. They matter a lot more than we previously thought they did. Even though maybe your cycle time isn't changing at all, your PR cycle time is staying the same, the cognitive load that a developer experiences when doing reviews is greatly lightened, or their cognitive load while actually doing the coding task is lightened. We should expect to see some reflection in the quantitative data, but let's imagine that we don't, but we see it reflected in the qualitative data. That is enough to, you know, that is a case for introducing
Totally.
the tool. It's just like a quality of life improvement for developers. It's going to help them be able to think about deeper problems versus getting stuck in the tooling or stuck on a problem. A lot of these things take a lot of time also to see the trends. You can't
Yeah.
expect to deploy the tool and then the next day see, because
See the big
yeah, the
impact.
other thing is like
There's behavior
it's
change.
behavior change, and like it's like with any tool, you can't just expect like, oh, now we have Circle CI, and so now everyone should be doing CD seamlessly and perfectly from day one. Like that doesn't work. It takes a
Yeah.
while for people to learn how to use the tools in the ways that are most effective to them as well. There's a lot of training and support that needs to come along with introducing these tools, and that takes time as well. There's a rollout phase.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the behavior change has been very interesting to
Hmm.
see is that, let's say, a couple years in now to the ChatGPT era. But, I would say for the first year, there was a lot of people who were just kind of like yawning or like just
Hmm.
skeptical, or even when they got it, it's like, oh, I'm so used to going to Google, or I'm used to doing it this way. And it just takes time for people to kind of adjust to that new mindset.
For my own personal use, it took me a while to warm up to the tools. I'm right there in the research, and so I've seen how quickly it evolves as well. So my opinion, late 2022, if you would have asked me then, I would have said like a better Stack Overflow, or like whatever
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
really different
Yeah.
from what I say
Yeah.
now in February of 2025. I've seen examples and sort of like archetypes of AI tool usage in all different kinds of organizations and how it plays out. Some organizations are bringing in AI tooling because they don't want to hire any junior developers anymore. Some are using tools only with junior developers because they don't want to hire senior developers anymore. There's a lot of different organizational motivation
Right.
behind bringing in the tool,
Yeah.
whether that's right or wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everyone's got a different setup situation. I can't hire these kind of people where I'm
Yeah,
located, whatever.
I think my opinion looking forward a little bit into like what's the role of AI, my firm belief, and this has been my belief for the last 2 to 3 years actually, is always that the biggest gains are outside of the coding task itself, outside of code authoring itself. Because I've never met a developer, surprisingly, that wants to spend less time coding. I've definitely met developers that want to have their reviews done faster. I've met developers that want to have an easier time finding documentation or validation that the requirements are right, or writing fewer tests or more time for non-toilsome code, no doubt. I think it was right and normal that we focused on the coding task first because that's what we know the most about. It's what we have. We have repositories full of source code.
And a lot of time gets spent on that.
Yeah.
Right?
And so that made sense to be the place to start. But I really think I think first of all, by the end of 2025, AI code review is going to be just the absolute standard, the norm. It's just a normal way of working.
Yeah.
And then I think, we're already seeing early adopters that are applying AI really well outside of the coding task and really using it to enrich the whole software development cycle. I've still not seen this promise of you'll be able to do the one person $1 billion startup.
Right.
I don't think we're gonna get there. Anytime,
this year.
I don't know, this year, this decade, quite honestly, I think that really undervalues a lot.
It's almost hard to imagine, right? Like that. Yeah. What are they saying is couple people $1 billion, or maybe one person. I think you said one person. That's a Sam Altman said.
I will gladly eat my hat when that happens. I don't have a lot of confidence right now at this moment in time that that's going to happen. But I think we're in, I think, what an exciting time to be alive in the software development industry. I think this paradigm shift is as big as when Docker hit the scene. It's really cool that we've been able to, you and I of a certain vintage, have been able to kind of see
exactly see a couple of these
totally
big waves,
continuous integration, continuous delivery. This is the rise of DevOps, the rise of platform engineering. Now we have AI, Docker, orchestration, distributed systems. A lot of this stuff is really changing the fundamental ways that teams operate and deliver software. It's very interesting to see.
Well, I think what's also amazing about AI is, right, I think it will have so much impact on so many fields, right? It's going to change how every kind of knowledge job happens. And as you start to apply it to robots, then it's just kind of into the physical world as well in a very important way that, typically hasn't happened in that sense. So it's going to be kind of crazy next 10 years.
I use AI every day to do something. And I think if you would have asked me 2 years ago if I would do that, I probably would have been I'm not so sure. Maybe someday. But that day is now, it's changing so fast. It's really interesting to see month to month what's new.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Laura. Really appreciate it. It was a great conversation. And until next time, everyone, on Peer Review.
Cool.
Thank you.
See you around the internet, everyone.